Welcome back, everybody. This is our first episode of Continuous Delivery Office Hours in 2026. You're very welcome back with myself, Tony Kelly, Bob Walker, and Steve Fenton. Our topic for today is really a conversation around the cost-focused creation of software and I suppose, the value that you get out the other side when you have created that software and what that looks like. And this leads in a little bit to an article that Steve will be published. I'm going to say next week. Steve will be out in the wild. So I will hand you over to the man himself to give a little bit of an intro, and then we will take the conversation wherever it goes afterwards.
What I've been thinking about is related to all of this developer productivity space. And that includes platform engineering, developer experience. There are some teams called developer productivity. These teams whose job is to kind of make it so that software development can result in better outcomes. And it got me thinking about some really old stuff that some of us weren't even around for. And the example that was off the top of my head was the Lincoln Labs project for the SAGE radar system back in the 1950s. And Herbert Bennington wrote a paper in 1956. And one of the things he said in that paper was a proportion of your time should be spent writing utilities that will make your own programming job easier. So this was like the first mention that I'm aware of, and I'd be happy to hear of even earlier ones, of someone saying we should build tools that make it easier for developers to deliver value. I just thought, isn't it strange that we knew this answer in 1956? And then, like 30 years later, we were born, and it's now 2026, and we're still having to discuss the concept of investing in developer productivity as if it's a new thing.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned the old ways like that and the old tools. I'm sure you've probably read Hackers by Stephen Levy.
I haven't actually read that one. That's going to have to go on my to be read shelf.
Oh, you are missing out, brother. It starts with basically the very early hackers at MIT when they just had mainframes, and it progresses from MIT, and then what happened at MIT kind of spread out into the world at to Stanford and to Caltech and to all these other places, and then it moves on to discussing gaming, and that's kind of where that new hackers started living, was in the gaming industry in the 70s and the 80s. And one of the things that the hackers would do when they would get, say, a new tool, like a new computer, because it was a big deal. It wasn't like you just got a brand new laptop at the time. It was a mainframe is getting rolled in, or refrigerator-sized mini computer is getting rolled into the room, or something like that. The very first thing that they would all do is they would build tools to build tools type of thing, because it was just hey, this is just an empty box, an empty shell. And so you almost had to have that initial burst of, I need to have tools just to be productive. And then so like, it's kind of like this has been a recurring theme ever since, like you said, the 50s and the 60s.
Yeah, so that's got me thinking about this difference between organizations that get this and organizations that definitely don't get it. And I suppose the example off the top of my head is I remember being on a team. We were on 15-inch monitors, and the ask was, can we have a second monitor? Because there are so many things where you need to switch between foreground and background apps and to see what's going on, that having a second screen would just save you a lot of that, just like all those little paper cuts, like that general friction. And I was in an organization that said, no way, we're not spending hundreds of dollars on screens for developers. They can make do with what they've got. Whereas other organizations were like, it's a no-brainer. Like, developers cost a lot of money. If we can get more of the outcomes that we hired developers to get by giving them another screen, that's a really good return on investment. So it seems like we have two kinds of organization. We've got a company who are trying to just make development as cheap as they can make it. And there are companies who seem to acknowledge that the whole point of development is that you're getting some asymmetric payoff
Yeah.
at the end of it. And I don't know what kind of organizations you've worked at, if you've had a mix of those two types.
Yeah, I actually have. Well, my some of my very first earlier jobs, it was very much that software development was seen more of as a cost center, meaning it had some sort of sunk cost that you had to just put money into. And these particular organizations, the way that they made their money wasn't specifically because of the software. They viewed the software more like as an augmentation as to what they were doing. So it may provide some sort of online capability, or it might, whereas they might have been primarily in, say, print, for example. Or they provided more like, hey, the vast majority of the money that we make is primarily through phone calls, and all the software really is internal. So it doesn't have to look pretty, it doesn't have to work the greatest, as long as it just gets the job done, that type of stuff. And so when you view your software development teams as cost centers, and back to your point, instead of say being really in my mind, being more force multipliers, and how you can start improving your improving, increasing revenue and as well as decreasing costs, then that's when you kind of end up in those types of situations. And so, um, the very first computer I had out of university, I still remember to this day. It was a work computer. It was a size of two pizza boxes. It was a desktop, the size of two pizza boxes stacked on top of one another. And it was a 733 megahertz processor with like, I can't remember how much RAM, but it didn't have a huge hard drive. It was a mechanical hard drive, obviously, because that was what it was back in the day. Now, the reason why I remember the processor so much is because the gigahertz barrier had been broken 3 years earlier. And so it was like, why on earth are we developing on machines that are is using technology and using processor speeds that were over 3 years old? So that gave us an insight as to what it was like when you first started doing it. And in fact, the only reason we didn't get a bigger monitor, like we had the 15-inch monitors too, and it's just a monitor. That's all you had. The only reason I want to say we everyone got bigger monitors is because, as a company, they decided everyone should get bigger monitors. Everyone should get 19-inch flat screens, and that was like, oh my gosh, when we saw that come through, like it's like 1600 by 12 resolution. It's like we're living the dream on something like this. And the same thing happened, as I moved on. But then I had the chance to work for some companies that software was seen as a force multiplier. One of the companies that I worked for was really focused in on, it was a bank, and they're really focused in on the cost it was, how much money it cost them to lend out $100. So for every $100 that lent out, which was how much money did it cost them as a company? I can't remember the exact amount, but I remember it was industry leading, something like 82 cents, 50 cents. I can't remember what it was. Don't quote me on that, whatever. But the way that they were able to do that was via software and investing in software and investing in the teams and saying, we're really a software company that happens to be a bank, as opposed to the other way around. And I think
That's
that's
super
a
interesting, right? It's
subtle
that
difference.
realization that the technology is going to make such a huge difference to your business outcomes. I love that because, in this case, they aren't going, oh, we have to have software in order to keep tabs on this stuff.
Yeah,
And so let's spend the minimum we can having something that just works. They're actually saying, let's use this to reduce the real business cost, which is the cost per $100 that we lend.
yeah.
Mm.
And it was fascinating around how that all worked and the investment they would make with the internal tools that helps their other, like the underwriters and the loan, right, the loan creation specialists and account specialists and everything like that. Then they were like, well, it takes us. They started backing. Then they started, okay, we help them, and then we started looking at the developers and go, well, it takes us once a quarter. We can deploy once a quarter. And every time we deploy, it's about a week and a half of just being a total disaster of fixing bugs and all of these other issues. Okay, that has to improve. That doesn't scale. We have all of these company goals, and the only way for us to get there is to invest in our software. The only way to do that is we have to invest in our tools that make the software, that deploy the software, that help the developers and everything along those lines. So it's kind of this really stark realization of that in order to do this, you have to have that type of investment. So the funny thing is that when it comes back to like the hardware costs, when we have these discussions around hardware, is it worth money spending this much money on a monitor or two? At the end of the day, it's probably like at the end of it's probably talking like 5 hours development time in terms of like buying a new monitor, especially with the monitor prices these days. But it could save and improve that productivity just by 2%, just by 3%, or even a half percent can make such a huge difference that that 5 hours will pay back, or the $500, $600, $1,000 will be paid back, 10 times what it would have
Yeah.
cost you. And not only that, it's not like the monitor is going to suddenly break after a year. Most monitors will last 3, 4, 5 years if you take care of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And the interesting thing is that um, you kind of you have this thing where it's not just the monitor, it's then the IDE and it's the
Yep.
test tools and it's your deployment tool and it's your observability tool. And like when you layer all of those small things on top of each other, some of those are big things, some of them are small things, but you layer them on top of each other, and it takes you so far away from the team that won't spend on the monitors and won't
Yep.
spend on the IDEs and won't spend on the other stuff. So it's almost like, even though each thing might be a small decision, the accumulation of those decisions ends up being such a big deal. That's like the low performers versus the elite performers. That's how you're getting there, right? Through hundreds of much smaller decisions. Like,
Yeah.
oh, there's this tool for my ID that's going to run my tests in the background, in parallel, giving me instant feedback visually if the line of code that I'm working on at the moment is now failing a test. It's like that little tool choice, like suddenly you're not having to stop and run a command and see the test results and then work out where that line of code is. And so it's like, you know, a tiny, you might be able to count 90 seconds of time saved, like in one instance of that, but then it's happening a million times a week across this team of developers that you've got. So yeah, it makes a big difference.
Incremental improvements is really kind of when it comes back to. I I don't know how much you followed professional cycling, um, but Sky
Oh,
UK, the Sky
mm,
team when it came out, because I mean that was right at the tail end of the doping
mm.
scene when postal U.S. Postal Service team and they Lance Armstrong was doping on EPO like crazy, and you saw the speeds just climb like a rock and climb like a not rocket, not like a rock, but like climb like a rocket over the 90s, and then they kind of stopped because they said we have to clean up the sport and we have to do all of these other things, and so teams started riding they started riding clean, and then you saw the speeds go down. But now we're kind of back to where they were back in the 90s. But it wasn't because suddenly everyone was starting to dope again. But Sky UK kind of led the. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is my understanding. But Sky UK kind of led the everybody in terms of incremental improvements. It said, okay, we're going to really invest in body position. We're really going to invest in the equipment that we use. We're going to find the best ways to shave off, this little thing, this gram here, gram there. Doing this will make it a little bit more aerodynamic. We're going to invest in nutritionists. We're going to invest in, massage specialists and recovery. We're going to do all of these little things, and every little thing might improve your performance by say a half percent or 1%. And if you measure it over like an hour or 4 hour or 5 hour bike ride, you're talking maybe a minute or two with each improvement. But over time, it starts adding up to 10 minutes, 15, 20 minutes. And then they started dominating for quite some time until everyone else caught up again and said, oh, we need to do the exact same.
Yeah,
There's a
that
there's a
incremental
very
improvements was such a good technique because everyone else is like, how do we get 10%? And there's
Yeah.
no answer to that question. No one thing that you do at that level of sport will get you 10%. But if you can just find those like really tiny fractional improvements, but then layer them on top of each other, you get a big impact.
there's a there was a very similar story. I think it was early 2000s, maybe early 2000s or 2010s. Team GB, I think it was their rowing team.
Mm,
They pretty much looked at it, will it make the boat go faster? That was their motto. And it
yep.
was they just drilled down into every single little thing, and that was the question that they asked of every decision that they were making. And I can't remember, they were like eighth, 10th in the world, not really in the sort of running for whatever the next Olympics, and they ended up winning gold. And I think it's kind of spun into they're too old to row. I'm sure they row casually now, but it's almost spun into I think they have a consulting firm and it is all based around the logic of will it make the boat go faster. So it's a pretty common, I think, approach for software, for life, sport, everything in between. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And it
Yeah.
makes sense for when you apply it to software development as well. It's like the small incremental improvements, the little things, they add up over time to make a big
Yeah.
difference. All those little things. So back to the, writing the tools to make tools or tools to improve your productivity or the things that make your life a little bit better. It just makes sense on something like that. Now, we have to address, I guess, the elephant in the room, which will probably naturally come up at anyone who's watching this, which will be agentic AI, and using tools such as Copilot and AI agents to go out and do all these various things for you. I think that's, I want to say, when you listen to the hype, it's to what you said, Steve, where it's that 10% improvement, that 20% improvement that people are looking for. But if we're being honest with ourselves, I would suspect it's probably going to be closer to the incremental improvements. That's what we're going to see. Now, don't get me wrong, they add up over time. And all those small incremental improvements will add up over time, but you're not going to immediately just drop an agentic AI workflow into your developer teams and immediately see, you know, 10%, 20%, 50% improvement. Um, that's just not feasible. You're not always doing the thing that the agentic AI is meant to automate for you.
And it's such a small part of the overall picture, right? Because
Yep.
software delivery doesn't just happen on my keyboard in my IDE. I need to understand my users well enough to be able to be in a position to solve a problem for them. And I need to be able to get the change that I've just made all the way through a solid pipeline that takes it to production. So even if you could get a larger benefit in that coding stage, you have to pay attention to that whole flow of value as well. But I quite like if you combine the rowing example, which is incredible mission clarity,
Yep.
with the incremental improvements from the cycling team, you can kind of directly apply that because now instead of saying, oh, but it'll make me code faster, you're like, yeah, but is the boat moving faster? This whole thing. Like, if you were, as a rower, were able to unleash 20% extra energy, all that's going to happen is you're going to start clashing your oars against everyone else who doesn't have that boost. So you
Yep.
have to make sure the whole flow is there to get that benefit, which is sometimes why an incremental improvement is better because you can kind of like improve one piece, identify where that causes a bottleneck, work on that bottleneck, and then the bottleneck will move somewhere else. And you kind of like you need to be able to chase that around as it moves.
And it's funny you say that. It's much more than just software development and writing the actual code pieces themselves. So internally at Octopus, we're actually going through an exercise of changing our work tracking. We're using a tool right now. It's not Jira, but we're using a tool right now to track our work for our R&D teams. And we've kind of reached the point of we have used the tool to we're pushing it to its absolute limit, and it's just not working for us anymore. And we're running into a lot of just those nasty little paper cuts that over time, I think incremental improvements is a good term, but it's also decremental. You know, I don't know what the decremental, not the whatever you call it. It decrements the performance as well.
Yeah.
So you can increase it or you can decrease your performance. You can increase it by a 0.5% or you could decrease it by a 0.5%. Back to your point of like the monitors, having two monitors versus one monitor. Well, when you have one monitor, that decreases your performance because you're always going back and forth, and you're losing that just that little bit each time. You're just dying, a death by a thousand paper cuts. So we're kind of running into that right now, and so we're making a very significant investment, not just in the tool itself, the new tool that we're looking into, but also in terms of people hours, in terms of like, is this the right choice? Is this tool going to work for us? And so we have the natural pilot programs, we have all this other stuff. So it's not, again, I think that's the thing that I guess I get a little frustrated when I hear about agentic AI is that it's hyper focused in on solving a couple of use cases around the developers, writing the code or doing a few of these tasks, not the much bigger picture of the overall end-to-end work and life cycle of actually creating software.
Yeah. Although I'm sure it could help if they could bring it into these real user monitoring scenarios. If it
Mm-hmm.
could identify where users are getting frustrated We've got things like rage clicking
Yep.
as a metric in the existing tools. I'm sure it will be able to find more ways. Like maybe there's a way of it detecting certain mouse patterns or confusion patterns to highlight back to the software company. Look, people are struggling with this strange part of your software. You know, that great big blue box that looks like a button but isn't.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's yeah, but then again, those are like I think that's like you use like that's when you're using other tools and you're using other almost like other AI pieces to help augment that particular workflow. So it's a very interesting question of where does that fit in. But ultimately, when it's all said and done, it's how much money do you want to invest in improving, doing those incremental improvements, and making sure that it, quote unquote, the boat is going faster. And I think that's a really important analogy. Because yeah, it, I like that analogy. If it doesn't matter if you as an individual rower are suddenly 20% faster because you might be
Yes.
smacking the person behind you or the person in front of you, and the boat's not
Yeah.
going faster.
Races
So
are
like,
lost
Yeah.
when the
yeah,
rhythm is lost, right? So
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's it.
super important. Like you need to bring along that whole chain of individuals. And you know, I mean, people learn the hard way that you can start real fast,
oh
but
yeah,
you don't win the race that way. You have to know how to pace yourself for a successful result.
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
So
Very
the
good.
other
Yeah,
thing
good.
that I wanted to circle back to, and this was because it's just popped into my head. Bob was talking about the organization who were looking at the cost per $100 of loan. I thought, well, that's interesting because when we're looking at these improvements, they cost us some money, but we get some
yep,
benefit. And I suppose there are other scenarios that are kind of analogous to that. Like sometimes you loan some money out and people don't pay it back.
oh
And
yeah,
again, with software, you might try adding a fourth monitor or a fifth monitor. And at some point, it might not give you a return, or it might cause a problem because now your problem is which monitor is this thing opened up on, right? So you're actually
oh yeah,
now losing productivity. So that kind of financial example, I thought, has got a lot of interesting comparisons to make with this investing in productivity. Um, but I kind of feel that the companies who are focused on cost either don't understand the value side of it and they're not looking at the boat going faster. They're looking zooming in too close to just the cost piece. Um, and that's the problem to overcome. It's like
yeah,
you're going to be making bets on this thing improving productivity, and you're basically looking at over the course of 10 bets, like do the wins pay for themselves and the ones that we lose?
yeah. The phrase that I keep coming back to in my head is plateauing. So if you let's say if you're hyper focused on cutting costs, software costs, people costs, whatever the case may be, you're going to plateau in terms of the benefits in which those the cost reductions are going to provide you. Because at some point you're going to plateau. Then hopefully, if you do it right, it's just going to stay. The benefit is just going to stay flat. If you do it wrong, it's just going to go off the cliff, and you'll end up crashing your company and causing a whole bunch of panic and all this other stuff. And the same is true on the inverse in terms of investing in software tools. Like you said, adding a second monitor, there's a noticeable increase in terms of productivity, developer happiness, everything like that. Maybe the argument of adding a third monitor, you could say, okay, it's not a linear thing. It's not like if I add a third monitor, I'm suddenly going to see that exact same performance improvement. If I add a fourth monitor, I add a fifth monitor. If I give every developer, if I spend the money and I give every developer, the fastest possible machine that money can buy at that particular second in time, I give every developer the best monitors. So everyone has two 4K monitors and they're OLEDs and they're perfect and there's no problems whatsoever. You have the best peripherals, you have the best seats, you have the best everything like that. But what end up happening is you just plateau a lot faster. You just basically made that investment and you plateau a lot faster. So you're not going to see that performance. You're not going to see those incremental improvements over time. And so I think that's kind of where you have to make the decision and really analyze and start getting into that. So I guess the point I'm making, the long, the long-winded point I'm making is that you can incrementally improve once you hit that plateau, but don't confuse the two. So making a significant investment for, in terms of the the materials, the compute, everything like that, the experience for the developers, the Joel Spolowskis of the world, where everyone's getting their own office. You're going to plateau. You're not going to suddenly increment. You're not going to see like, oh my gosh, we're going to have 15x performance improvement by doing this next thing. So then after that, then that's where those incremental improvements need to start occurring. That's when you start need to going into is like, okay, where can I improve the developer's experience? And this is where things like, to your point of that piece of software that runs in the background, that runs your unit tests automatically for you as you're making a change to a line of code or to a class or to whatever the case may be. That 90-second saving, that 1 minute saving, that 5 minute saving. Same thing with investing in your build tools. Hey, how can we improve our build times? If we can shave a couple minutes off, that's great. And you'll always see that happen with the deployment times. You always see that happen with your build times. If I'm going to invest a significant amount of time and effort, and you see that initial drop in build times or that initial drop in deployment times because you find all the low-hanging fruit to fix. You find all the little problems. You find all the, hey, I can do this, I can do that. That's going to really improve all these different things. And then after that, it's like, I'm not going to see the same improvements with the same investments. I'm going to see incremental improvements. I'm going to see, okay, instead of a 20-minute drop, the next improvement might only be a 30-second drop. And that's fine. And that's just something you just have to kind of realize. So, um, yeah, just I think it's important to make that recognition and understanding as from a company's point of view. Back to the banks example, they use that metric as a way to analyze whether or not they're doing good or bad, but they kind of ran into that plateau pretty quickly. So that's why they just look at that and say, we're not trying to save 5 cents or 20 cents or anything like that. It's really like a half a cent. By doing this, well, can we save these types of things? And that was really
Yeah.
the only way they could start measuring that. Um,
Yeah, that makes
that's,
sense.
yeah,
Because that's the actual business
yep,
metric. It makes sense. So yeah, I get that. I think the interesting thing is that it almost feels like if you're cost focused in terms of denying productivity gains, you end up paying more
yep,
because your solution ends up being we need to hire another developer on this team in order to deliver the stuff we need to do. And that's number one, probably more expensive than just giving everyone else the laptop, the monitor, the better tools, Octopus, Honeycomb, give them those things. It would probably be cheaper. But also, adding a developer doesn't actually increase the productivity of the team. There is a point at which adding people just doesn't speed anything up. So but that's how they end up spending. They end up spending by like it's like desperation. Just
hmm
add more people, And I've been in teams where they've been saying that there's some regulatory deadline. They know they have to be finished, and instead of asking you what you need to be able to do it, they start saying, if we hire in like 8 consultants, we'll add in 8 consultant developers, then we can do it right. It's like, well, that effectively will mean the existing team stops working on this problem and starts onboarding these external people who, even at the end of that onboarding, will have 1 month's experience compared to 2 years' experience on this work. It's like that just isn't an answer. But that I kind of feel that it's almost like by being miserly and trying to save those small costs, you end up with bigger costs.
yeah.
Mm.
The
Th- th-
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, does this lean into the sort of build it yourself versus buy conversation? I know even from a marketing perspective in the past, in previous jobs, it's been like, hey, there's this tool, it's whatever, $100 a month, 200, whatever. And it's like, oh, Dave and his team, they could build it for you, and you're kind of like, okay. And then Dave half builds the thing, and there's, you don't get all the features, and it kind of doesn't work, and it's like it was only $100 a month. It's like
Yeah.
we could have just brought it in and been useful with it immediately, essentially. So I think that's the challenge as well.
Yeah, I think the DIY approach often feels like you can solve a big chunk of the problem quite quickly in low fidelity. And so you think, yes, it's great. I worked on a team where they had written a PowerShell script to do the deployments. But there were some sharp edges in there that would cause deployments to hugely blow up. The process was that you popped the like gold copy in a folder, and it was a .NET app. And so the next step was delete the web config file because we're not gonna like deploy that because they've all got their own web config files in each environment on each server that points to the right things. And of course, it just meant that there was this sharp edge there that if someone forgot to delete that web config file and then used the PowerShell script, all of the config got overwritten in every environment that it was being pushed to. So it kind of felt like it was cheaper than doing a proper automated deployment, but actually, that stability issue and the time it takes to recover from that cost a lot more.
Hmm.
And it also still wasn't as like it didn't audit like you would audit a deployment, and it couldn't do variable substitution. It didn't really know about environments. There's all these things that it doesn't do that won't occur to you when you're solving this problem in like a folk way. So yeah, I think it's those sharp edges that are in there that eventually cost you the money, like sometimes big time.
I I agree. I think that what I come back to when it comes to the build versus buy, the ultimate question I always want to ask is what is the primary driver for building versus buying a commercial off-the-shelf tool? If there is a valid business case reason, not money, that's not related to money. If it's related to we have evaluated all of the tools that are out there, we have put them through the paces, and for our needs, for our business needs, in order to accomplish our goals, we have to build this tool that replicates some functionality from this offering, from this offering, and from this offering, because our use cases are so unique for whatever reason the case may be. I think maybe like back to say I'll use um, I'll use Facebook as an example. You know, what they're doing, like like types of, type of work that they're doing, how cutting edge. I mean, they're building their own hardware. I mean, they're one of the biggest computer builders in the world, server builders in the world. They just do it all internally for very logical business reasons because they have all of these, constraints and all of these different requirements. And so it makes a lot of sense for them to do something like that. But you have to also understand, you have to walk in with eyes wide open of we are making an investment into doing this. So when we build this tool, we are investing millions of dollars in people hours to not only build the thing, but also maintain the thing and fix any bugs and add any new features and functionality. And we know that this is going to be the thing and that we're willing to invest in this. When I worked at the bank, for example, we built our own loan origination system. In fact, I was a lead developer on that. And it was because we looked at all of the third party vendors that were out there and it did not meet what we needed it to do. And we said, we are going to fully fund a team to build this loan origination system. And it's going to meet all of our business requirements. We're going to have a dedicated business owner. It's going to talk to the business. It's going to do all of these different things. Now, when it comes back to the build versus buy, if there is a tool that can accomplish the vast majority of all of your goals, then it doesn't make a lot of sense. Or it can do things that you probably will never need to or ever dreamed of, or maybe it's more aspirational. So it comes back to like a continuous delivery tool like Octopus Deploy. Continuous delivery up to Kubernetes, up to Windows, up to Linux, up to Azure, up to AWS, up to all of these different tools. Fundamentally, if you go to different companies, it's going to be pretty much the exact same. You're not solving anything new. Those aren't new problems to solve. It's really the how do I do this with the complexity of my business and my requirements. That's where kind of it gets a little nutty. And so then it doesn't make a lot of sense because it does meet a lot of needs. This is why companies like Dell still make servers because the vast majority of companies out there are not Facebook. The vast majority of companies, they just need a commercial off-the-shelf server that just need to rack in, slide into a rack and call it good, and it does the thing for them. So again, when it comes back to build versus buy, the build reason shouldn't just be because we don't want to pay for the software or we don't want to pay for the hardware. There should be a
Yeah.
logical business reason to do it.
Yeah, you see some real major competitive advantage in doing
Yes.
it differently to what you could obtain. And I think this is what they surfaced. I think Eric Evans has this in domain-driven design. He has this decision flow of working out, is this thing really a like core domain for your business, a place where you're going to differentiate yourself from
Mm-hmm.
others? And if it's not, you probably shouldn't build it. There are other ways of getting hold of that thing. And then you can focus way more of your energy on being different in the places where it really counts.
Oh yeah. The perfect analogy is the baker analogy. If I'm not going to invest in making my own containers because that's not really going to differentiate me unless all the containers out there smash all my cookies or all my cakes and there's nothing out there. Unlikely in this day and age. But I can differentiate on the materials that I put into, my chocolate chip cookies, how I do this, finding the right chefs, finding the best equipment that can then, or maybe custom making a couple of pieces of equipment to key differentiate it. A
Yeah,
really good movie around this is, do you ever see the movie The Founder? It stars Michael Keaton. It's about Ray
Rings a bell.
Kroc and the founding of McDonald's. And he visited the founders of McDonald's, and they were partners for a little while. And the founders of McDonald's, aptly named McDonald, they custom built all of the kitchen pieces that fits to their quote unquote, they called it the speedy system in the movie, which is the fast food system, because it differentiated them from their competitors. I mean, anyone can make a hamburger, but they made a hamburger and they gave it to the customer in under 30 seconds, which was wildly different than anybody else out there. That was their key differentiator. In order to do that, they had to invest in a system. In order to do that, they had to invest in the hardware. I mean, they could have bought anyone could have bought a grill off the shelf, but it's like, no, we're going to custom build this grill because it helps us do X and helps us deliver the hamburgers much faster.
There you go, folks. Your recommendations for next week is to watch The Founder and read Hackers.
That's right.
Steve, have you anything that you want to wrap up with on our weird and wonderful questions that you can
Yeah, what
conjure up?
yeah.
existential
So,
questions are you going to ask us today?
well, it's actually a really easy one today because we're in the first week of January. So, what did you get? Like, what did you
Oh,
get?
in terms of like for gifts, you can actually, I don't know if you can see it. It looks like a Game Boy. That's actually a Lego Game
Hmm.
Boy over my shoulder.
Oh,
Oh, I've seen these. Yeah, you literally
Yeah.
build the casing for the whole thing, and all the buttons slip
Yeah,
into
yeah,
it. So
yeah.
it's like,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's not a working Game Boy, obviously. It's just a Lego Game Boy, but it has slots that you can actually. It comes with two little quote unquote game cartridges you can put in there. It comes with different screens you can put in that that do the funny like they do the movement depending on how you look at it on everything along those lines. I'd probably say that's the most noticeable thing that I can show that's easy to to show you.
I wasn't brave enough to keep mine in the room, so kids got a new puppy for Christmas. So
Oh,
so I get one too, as the way it goes. Uh, so we got a little cockapoo, and I don't have that many calls on a Friday, so I brought his crate up, and he's just been snoozing a bit. But I was like, I'll start talking, and he'll start barking. So
oh,
the kids are down playing with him. So he's called Rua, and another bit of useless trivia. Rua is the Irish word for like dark red, foxy red. So he's you can imagine the color. So yeah,
oh.
so that is my
brilliant.
notable. How about
So
you,
we'll
Steve?
watch this space to see him appearing in an episode soon once
Yes,
he's been
yes,
streaming trained.
yes.
So
If he makes an appearance, you'll probably hear him before you see him.
How you get along with the puppy chewing?
Good. Not too. I had him crate trained in a couple of days, so that helps. It's kind of like he is happy to potter into his little crate and stay there for a
That's good.
bit, and then just 100% monitoring when he is out and about. It's like if you let him dander away and do his thing, he's going to chew stuff. It's not his
Yep.
fault. It's mine.
Yeah.
So,
oh,
but it's
Well,
good.
brilliant.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
We found a mix with using I think it's apple cider and vinegar. I can't remember the exact mix.
Oh,
You can find it on
yes.
the internet someplace. If you
Yes.
mix it up, if you just spray it on the thing that you don't want him to chew on, it actually works pretty well because we did that
Oh.
when we had a puppy, and she when she chew on something that she'd be like, ah! So she learned pretty quick.
Not
Like
doing
she
that
actually
again.
made that sound too. She's like, oh, don't like that.
Yeah.
Because she definitely she got into a few things to say the least.
Yeah.
Thankfully, that the room that we primarily kept her in was, we didn't really care about too much. We're like, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is a it's a
Yes.
living room. It's a family room. It's the room that you go in
Yes.
and things just kind of get naturally destroyed.
Yes. Good tip. I like it. There's three from three, folks. Apple cider
There you go.
vinegar for dogs. Steve, how about you?
Well, I very happily picked up a
Oh,
Fender Acoustasonic Standard,
Ooh,
which is quite a new one that they're doing. It's an actual hollow-bodied Acoustasonic, but it's a very thin profile. So that was
interesting.
my little thing, and I love it. It's probably the best setup guitar I've ever like picked up. Like the
Really?
intonation is perfect on it. So that was mine, and
I'll have to
I'm
take a
still
look
a
at that.
punk, so I got the Jazzmaster version, not the Telecaster version.
Is that
yeah.
uh is that a bass or is that a guitar?
It's a guitar. Yeah.
Okay, okay. Just when you said jazz master, that's what threw me off because typically when I hear the word jazz master, that's what I come
It
back with.
just has the offset body. So
Hmm.
yeah,
Okay.
which is chaotic when you have to put it on a stand. Like they're not designed to sit on a stand. They look drunk, but
Yeah, that's you can't see it, but on my wall over here, I might have because I think I zoomed in a little bit. I used to I had the electric, they had the Fender Strat hanging off the wall, so like you can get the wall mounts and everything like that, and it actually works out pretty well. But
yeah, I
that's
need
really
some
cool.
walls, and then I can actually hang them by the neck, which would be better. So
The problem is the wall
Yes.
right behind me. It it looks like it's just drywall, but right behind that drywall is brick. It's because I'm in the basement, and so hanging anything off of that is it's fun to drill into that. So if I got something like that, I have a wall right there. I could probably put it up, but I'd have a couple questions from my wife about why I would need a fifth guitar.
yeah, it's a question I can't ever understand, that one.
Said like a
I
true
just do
guitar
confusion.
enthusiast.
Like, why do you need another guitar? And you're like, what? I don't get it. I do limit myself to just three, which is pretty good going.
Oh, I I also got a because I travel a lot, obviously, so I got a new travel laptop bag, the messenger bag, and I put on my Amazon wish list because that's the easiest thing to do. And my wife was looking through it, and she goes, "Don't you have enough bags?" I'm like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! You are not allowed to criticize Christmas lists.
This is my choice.
This is my choice. I mean,
Yeah,
if people don't want to buy it for me, they don't have to buy it for me."
yeah, we were never allowed to tell our grandparents, don't I have enough socks?
Yeah, exactly.
How the tables have turned.
This sadly, as you've gotten older, the answer is no, you can never have enough socks.
Yeah, they were right all along.
I know.
Yeah, yeah. All right, very good.
Well,
Thank you.
your gifts are way cooler than the way more exciting than the ones I got. At least
Oh,
the ones I can
I'm
show.
sorry.
So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yours does not need taken out to the toilet at 4 a.m. But Bob, that's
oh,
that's the
my dog.
difference.
I
Most,
have a 4-year-old dog, and she likes to go out to the bathroom at 4 a.m.
yeah,
still, so that's fun.
yeah, yeah. For the first week anyway. We've made it to six now, so we're getting to the
She
good
gets up.
time.
Mine gets up at 4 still.
Mhm. Yeah, fun times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Alrighty.
Thank you both very much. Until next time.